Stand and join us in worship this morning. Welcome.
I have run as far as anyone So if y'all don't know me, my name's Jake Schwindel, resident here at COTC, and I'm starting a new series called Secrets of the Pulpit. Today's episode, The Preacher's Folder. I'm sure it's a mystery of what actually goes on up here, but I'm about to clue you in. While you think he's delivering you a message, he's really just checking out who caught the biggest bass last week. John Parkey asked me to come up here and read y'all the parable of the lost son. If y'all want to follow along, it's Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. So Jesus continued. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered all his wealth in wild living. Thank you. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against you and against heaven. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. He came near the house. He heard the music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never give me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when a son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found.'"
What do you think, Jake? All right, good job. He's a good reader. By the way,
practicing my words.
This is my manila. Why would I go buy manila folders when I can carry my sermons in this right here, right? And at the same time, figure out where to catch the best fish, the biggest fish. Anyway, what Jake just read is what's called a parable. So it's not a true story. It's a story that Jesus tells, Jesus makes up in order to teach us things about Him and things about the Father, God, and things about how His kingdom works, and teach us things about ourselves. And so he tells stories like this, often parables, in order to help his listeners better understand. And so what Jake just read, the story goes like this. There was a man, and the man in the story is a father. And the father in the story represents God. This father has 2 sons, right? The younger son approaches dad, and he says to his dad, "Hey, give me my inheritance now. Like, I want what I haven't worked for now." In other words, he's a millennial. I love millennials. I do. I'm just kidding. I really do believe in millennials. That was a bad thing to say. A few millennials do dumb things, and we label you all those dang millennials. But I'm kidding. Now, let me ask you this question. When does someone get an inheritance? When does someone normally receive an inheritance? After somebody dies, right? So in essence, what this son is saying to his father when he's asking him for his inheritance is, I can't wait for you to die. I want it now. Like, I wish you were dead. And some of us have heard that before, right? From our kids. Some of us have said that to our parents back when we were 16, 17 years old. I wish you weren't my mom. I wish you were dead. I hope I never see you again. I hate you. And on some level, the son doesn't appear to be angry, but this is the sentiment of the story. Like, he's saying, I'm out of here. I no longer want anything to do with this life or the people in it. And this is kind of weird because the father receives the request and the father blesses him with it. The father obliges and gives the son his inheritance. I don't know about you, but if I had come to my dad back when I was 16, 17 years old and said, Dad, give me my share of my inheritance, my dad would have said, oh, okay, here's your inheritance, it's wisdom. Get a job. Like, that would have been his inheritance to me. But this father complies, right? And so the son packs up. He kind of says, see you when I see you. And he leaves the country. Now, when he leaves the country, he doesn't just leave his heritage and traditions and his people behind. What he also leaves behind are his morals and ethics that he'd been taught growing up. So some of us parents know this pain. You know what I mean? Like the sorrow of our kids just walking away from the life we hope they'd lived, walking away from what is good for them and walking into what we know will cause them pain and eventually guilt and shame. Like some of us parents know this, and we've spent hours praying for our kids and worrying for our kids and pleading with our kids to come back. This is how the father's got to be feeling. Like, this father has got to be feeling heartbroken that his son is walking away. So the son takes his inheritance, and it says in the passage that he squandered it all in wild living. What's that mean? In other words, the son goes to Vegas to live, right? Like, he goes to Vegas and he rents out the best penthouse from the best finest hotel. He throws the wildest parties. Like, he goes crazy. He parties like a rock star. Like, I'm picturing Charlie Sheen calling him and saying, dude, you need to slow down. Like, Charlie Sheen is wise compared to this guy. And so he's living it up. He's wild, and he's having fun at all costs. Sex and drink, and he's got a whole new set of friends, and he's creating this whole new exciting life. And it's fun. It is fun. And it is exciting. And he's burning down Vegas, and he's tasting all of the pleasures that he can possibly taste. Now, Jesus is telling this story to teach us something. In order to be taught, we have to ask some questions as we listen to, as we read or hear the story. And one of the questions we have to ask is this: what is the younger son after really? What's he really looking for? I think the younger son is after what a lot of us are after even today. The younger son thinks that happiness and contentment will be found in the freedom to do whatever it is he wants to do. You know what I mean? Like, if I can answer to no one, and I can do whatever, if I could just have enough money where I could be my own boss, so I answer to no one, and have enough money where I can just buy whatever I want in the moment, I will find happiness and I will be content. Now, I think that's how the world tends to work right now. I think that's how a lot of us tend to work. And the younger son, listen to this, we're going to label him, the younger son is the rebellious son. Because he believes, if I rebel, I will be happy and I will be content. I will find happiness and contentment. Jesus is trying to teach us something here. The younger son represents, the rebellious son in this story represents someone. You know what I mean? Like he's a fictitious character. Jesus tells a story. He represents someone else. In fact, the rebellious son, the younger son, represents every single rebellious son or daughter that has ever lived. Like we're supposed to read or hear this story and wonder, am I the rebellious son? We're supposed to find ourselves in this story. Like he's talking to everyone who's ever had a season of life where they lived in and did whatever they wanted to do. Maybe as you hear this story, you're thinking, yeah, that is me. I have lived that kind of life. Maybe some of you are thinking, I still do. That still is me. But the truth is, all of us in some way are like the rebellious son to some degree. Like think about this. Here's some this is how you might diagnose yourself. Think about these things. If you have a problem with authority, like a boss or an employer, a teacher or a professor, the police, then you might have the younger son, rebellious son in you. If your favorite song from the 80s was We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister, no, we ain't gonna take it. Or if metal isn't, or rock isn't your thing, maybe the crooner version of I Did It My Way by Frank Sinatra. If the speed limit is 55 and you're like, I'm not driving 55, I'm driving 57. If you're like me, I'm driving 65, because I've heard. If you rebel against the laws of nature, right? There are certain laws of nature that if we rebel against, they affect our health. Like if you know you should eat, if the doctor said your cholesterol is high and you should eat salad and lean meat, but you choose ice cream and Mountain Dew, forget that. If you've ever rolled your eyes as you walked away from someone who was telling you what to do, like we've all got the younger son in us somewhere. No one tells me what to do. I have that in me, more than I really want to admit. Like we're all rebellious to some degree. We think we know better than the Father how to find happiness and contentment. Now, so the story goes on. The younger son eventually blows through his cash, right? Like he's got $5 left, and he throws it down on the blackjack table, hoping to win lunch money or win enough to buy one more evening in the hotel at the penthouse. But he loses it. So the money dries up, and what happens when the money dries up? So do his friendships. They're all gone. And in an instant, the younger son, the rebellious son, goes from the penthouse to the outhouse. He begins working for a pig farmer, which for a Jewish man, for this Jewish son, that would have been a sin, right? Jewish people don't eat pork because pigs are considered unclean. The Old Testament, that was one of the Old Testament laws. Pigs are considered unclean. But this Jewish son works with pigs. He feeds the pigs because he has no other option. Now listen to this. What's lower for a Jewish boy like this? What's lower than working with the pigs? Being jealous of the pigs. And this is the younger son. This is how low and hungry that he's gotten, that he longs to eat what the pigs are eating. He's jealous of the pigs. Like this is rock bottom low. Like this is loneliness, isolation, guilt, and shame at its worst. And he knows, he feels this. Nobody cares for me. I've left all the people who care for me. I'm in a place now where nobody cares for me. Loneliness, isolation, ever felt that way? I have. And at this point, he comes to his senses. He has a moment of clarity, and he thinks, my dad's not going to take me back. My dad's not going to call me his son. My dad has nothing left to give me. But my dad's servants, his workers at the farm, they get paid something. So maybe he'll take me back as a farmhand. So he comes back to his senses and he says, I'm going to go back to my dad and ask him if he'll let me be one of his servants. Now listen to this. The son, certainly in his situation, it couldn't have been a flippant decision because the son knows that going back to the father is going to have repercussions. Do you know what I mean? Like he has to think through this conversation because he realizes he doesn't have any leverage left with his dad anymore. Like there's no bargaining. He realizes all I can offer is an apology and beg to be treated like a servant. The son has to think the father will not accept me back as his son. He knows the father's going to be mad at him. And once the father finds out he spent his entire inheritance, the father's going to hate the son. So how humiliating is it going to be for the son to come crawling back to the father? And think about this. Put yourself in the shoes of the father. What would you do if you're the father? Like you see your broke butt son, that's a church version, walking down the road to the house. You see him walking up to your house, and he's wasted all of your hard-earned money on hookers, on booze, and on parties. What would you do if you were the father? Well, you'd gear yourself up for the biggest I told you so ever. You know what I mean? If you're the son, what do you think the father's going to do? What do you think the father's going to say when you knock on the door and he answers? You probably think he's going to let you have it. He's going to give you an earful of sarcasm and insults, and like he's going to open the door and say, "Well, look who's back. The big man, right? Where's your money now? Where's your freedom now? Where's your happiness now? Oh, now you want to come back and be with me," right? Like you're going to get sarcasm from him. And you're going to hear him just kind of rip you. And you're going to hear all of that, and the message underneath all of his sarcasm, you think, is going to be, you're an idiot, you're a loser, you're stupid, you're a failure, you're no good. Some of us have heard that before about ourselves, haven't we? Anybody ever told you that or kind of subtly hinted at that? Maybe it was your dad, maybe it was a boss, maybe it was your spouse, I don't know. And those words, when we hear them, ring loud and clear. And for some of us, we've heard we were not smart enough, we were not pretty enough, we were not athletic enough, we were not good enough from as early as we can remember. And that is exactly how we still think about ourselves as adults. What someone said about us back then has defined us in some ways. I'm a screw up, I'm an inconvenience, I'm stupid, I'm an idiot, I'm worthless. Some of you know and even still feel that have heard and even still feel that today. And because of that, you are super ultra afraid of rejection because you've been rejected most of your life. And the younger son is scared of this. Like he's got to be intimidated as he walks up to the door. And listen, this story is for you and me. Because here's the deal about the story too. We tend to think the main character in the story is the son, but it's not. Listen, the main character, this story is all about the Father. Jesus tells us this story so that we will know the grace and the mercy of a good Father, because that is not what happens to the son. Right? The dad on his porch or leaning against the fence post, he sees the son in the distance. Jesus says this in the story, and this is important to note. What's that mean? It means that the father, all the while, the entire time the son is gone, the father has been waiting, and the father has been watching, and the father has been hoping that one day his son will return. That's why he sees him in the distance, because he's been watching and waiting for him. And when the father sees him, like he doesn't wait for the son to walk up to the porch. Matter of fact, the father begins to run out to meet him. Now, if you're the son, think about what this has got to look like. Like you come over the rise, you see the house, you're thinking, my dad is going to kill me, right? You come over the rise, and then you see your dad running down the road. You're like, oh, here it comes. This is exactly like I wonder if the son kind of began to brace himself for impact like a Florida Gator quarterback about to get sacked. You know what I mean? Like, And instead of getting sacked, instead of getting tackled, that doesn't happen. Instead, he experiences an embrace and a kiss, and he gets hugged. And then his dad starts shouting out orders to his staff, and he yells, my son was dead and is now alive. He was lost, and now he's found. And he starts shouting out orders, go make plans for the homecoming party. We are going to partay because my son is home. Now listen, the father in this story is God. And what the son experiences from his father is grace. It's called grace. The son does not deserve this reception, but he gets it. The son doesn't deserve to have anything else of the father's. But listen to this. He receives, in the end, the greatest gift of all. And this is it. This is what he experiences. This is the greatest gift of all. The son experiences restoration. Like the father calls him son. He sees him as his son. He yells, my son. What happens is the father should have, in that culture, rejected him. The entire community should have, based on their traditions, rejected the son for what he's done because he's unclean and because of all the sin that he's committed. But the father beats the community to the son, I think, in order to bring him back into the community before the community can reject him. He calls him his son. He restores him back into the community. He restores him back into the family. We would say that the son, when he left, burnt bridges with his family, with his dad, with the community. But here's the deal. You cannot burn the bridge to the Father. He always rebuilds. He always restores. He's always waiting, and he's always watching, and he's always hoping that you will come home. He's always ready to call you a son or a daughter. And this is revolutionary for the people listening, and maybe even for you here today. Listen to this. And this is what I really want you to know today. God, this is the premise of this whole story is this. God does not hate you. You are not too far gone. You are not too messed up for God. He loves you. There is always hope with the Father. He loves you as a son or daughter. It's His grace. Now, let's change pace. Let me talk about the other son for just a minute that Jake read about. Let's talk about the older son. So this father's throwing this party in the backyard for his son that's returned home. The older son is out in the field working, and he begins to, hear the DJ and smell the barbecue, and he kind of, what's going on? And he walks up, and somebody says, hey man, good news, your brother's home. Your dad's throwing a party for your brother because he's home. And the brother, this isn't really good news for the brother. And he chooses not to go into the party because he's mad. It's right. And think about the brother's situation. Like the older brother has done everything right. He stayed and he worked on the farm. He was the good son. And his dad is now throwing a party for the bad son. So the older brother, he's incensed, he's mad, he won't even go into the party. And so then his father comes out and says, why don't you come into the party? Your brother's home. And the older son won't even call him brother. He says, well, this son of yours. That's kind of how he addresses who the party's for. The father comes out and he says, when are you going to come into the party? We're having this party for your brother. And the first word out of the older brother's mouth is, look. Now, if this was my story, and the first thing I said to my dad was, look, the story would be over. It would end right there. They buried the older son that afternoon and mourned over his body, right? But the older son says, look at all that I've done. Look how good. Look, I'm the good son. I'm good. I stayed. I thought I was your favorite. He wasted it all. He wasted all of your stuff on hookers and booze and parties and now, and I stayed. And now you're throwing a party for him. There's no party for me. And I hear what the older brother's saying, right? And I think when I hear what the older brother's saying, I think, dude's got some points. Like he's kind of right. But what Jesus says to the older brother is just as revolutionary as what he said to the younger brother. Right? The younger brother was the rebellious son. The older brother, listen to this, was a religious son. And when I say religious, I mean that in the most negative sense of the word. The older brother, listen to this, felt entitled. The older brother felt like the father owed him something. Do you know what I mean? Like the older brother felt like the father was in debt to him. I've done this, and I've done this. I didn't spend your wealth. I didn't wish you were dead. I didn't sleep with prostitutes and stay drunk and high for days. I've been good. You owe me. That's how religion works. That's how most religions in this world work. We try to put God in our debt. Like if I do A, B, and C, then God, you've got to give me X, Y, and Z. If I do these things, then God owes me these things. Religion seeks to put God in our debt. And God is in debt to no one. God owes no one anything. And some of us are the older son. We seek to put God in debt to us. God answers to us. Think, and I've got part of me. There's a part of me that I've got the older son in me as well. You know what I mean? Like think about here's some ways to diagnose yourself in whether or not you're the older son too. Think about this. Why do you come to church? Why do you read your Bible? Why do you serve the needy in Mount Washington? Why do you hand out food at Dare to Care or Community Mission? Why do you give offerings? Why do you do the things? Why do you do the religious activity that you do? Is it because you have experienced the love, grace, and mercy, hope, joy, and love of Jesus Christ, and you just want to be with him where he's at and do his business? Or is it because you think, if I do enough, and if I pray enough, and if I give enough, then God will do good in my life. God will pay me back for my good deeds. If that's your mode of operation, if that's your MO, then the foundation of your faith will be weak. Like, think about it like this. If you think God's going to owe you, or you're trying to put God in your debt, what happens when life doesn't go your way? What happens to your faith then if you've done all these good things, but then the doctors call and it's not good news? What happens when you've done all these good things, but your son doesn't make the team? What happens when you do all these good things, but your marriage gets rocky and you struggle? What happens when you do all these good things and you lose your job? You do all these good things and your child leaves home. You've raised your kid with this formula. I've done this thing, I've done that. And your child leaves home and becomes the prodigal son and goes off the rails into a life of darkness. How do you respond to God in that? Why me? It's not fair. This is the older son. Look at me, look how good I am. If I don't get what I deserve, it's not fair. It's called self-righteousness. And here's the thing about self-righteousness. Self-righteousness is just as damning as rebellion. Because it's not that you want to be with God, it's that you want God's stuff. Does that make sense? You don't love God, but you love God's stuff. And that might sound like a little difference, but that is a big, big difference. Now, what does the older brother need here? The older brother needs the same thing as the younger brother. He needs the love and grace of a good father. He doesn't need more of the father's stuff. Even though he says he wants a party, he doesn't really need the father to throw him a party because he's begged for a party. What he needs is the love and the grace of the father. In this story, which brother are you? Do you think your good behavior requires God to give you good stuff? Or do you realize that the only reason you're in your Father's house is because of the Father's love and grace? I think some of us have read this story before, or we've heard this story before, or even today as we're listening to the story. I think some of us hear this story, and we know we're the rebellious son, but what we think we need to do is become the religious son. Not the rebellious son, but that's not the answer. The answer isn't move from being the rebellious son to the religious son. That's not the answer. The answer is this. The answer is Jesus. The answer is this. There's the rebellious son, there's the religious son, but then there's another son that's not in the story, but he's telling the story, and it's Jesus. We need Jesus, the redeeming son. And here's his story. Jesus leaves heaven to come to earth. Jesus leaves all the treasures of heaven. Jesus leaves all of his inheritance, so to speak, to come to us and die for us. Like in our rebellion and in our sin, Jesus comes and he gets nailed to a cross and he dies. Now listen to this about the cross. On that cross, there was purpose. There was purpose. And listen very closely to this purpose because it's deeply, richly, it's deep and rich theology that I'm about to share with you. And you need to understand this. God is good. Matter of fact, God is so extremely good that we cannot fathom how good he is because we are so distant from it. And he's so good, listen to this, he's so good that he can't deal, he's so good he has to deal with sin and rebellion and wickedness and oppression. Like he's so good that he has to violently and actively act against wickedness. Like he can't let wickedness just be without acting against it. Otherwise, it would compromise his goodness if in his goodness he didn't do something about wickedness. So when God looks at you and me, he sees the rebellious brother or he sees the self-righteous brother, the religious brother. When God looks at us, he sees our sin, he sees our wickedness, and he must be violent and active against it. He has to be because he's good. Now, because that's true, there are two options. One, either you and I are going to bear the guilt for all of our wrong and all of our sin and all of our wickedness, and we are going to pay the price, like we are going to pay the penalty we are due for our rebellion and self-righteousness. Or, second option, someone takes our place. That's what the cross is all about. Jesus Christ, a perfect, innocent man in every way, without sin, becomes the perfect sacrifice. God takes in his goodness, takes his one and only son, pins him to a cross, violently and actively pours out his wrath for your sin on his son, Jesus. So Jesus bears the wrath for all sin, all wickedness, all evil, all oppression, so that you and I could be called sons and daughters of Jesus, so that you and I could be made right with the Father, so that you and I could come home. So that you and I could come to the Father without the fear of being rejected, scoffed at, ridiculed, and punished. Jesus died so that we might live with God as our Father, forgiven, made right, made whole, and given a place with Him forever. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says this about God and His Son Jesus. It says, God made Him, Jesus, who had no sin, to be sin for us, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. Like, I don't make myself righteous. I can't say, God, look at me, look how good I am, I deserve it. When God looks at me, He sees sin. Even in my goodness and my self-righteousness, He sees sin. I can't make myself righteous. Jesus does that. I don't deserve it. That's why it's called grace. It's a gift we don't deserve. John 14:6 says this. Jesus answered, He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Like Jesus is saying, I'm the Son. I'm the one. You want to come home to the Father, whatever son you are, the rebellious or the religious, no one comes home to the Father except through me, except through Jesus. Do you know why Jesus is the better, older son in this story? Jesus isn't the younger, rebellious son or the younger, rebellious brother who took his father's wealth and selfishly spent it on his own gain. Jesus didn't do that. Matter of fact, Jesus is the son who left his father's treasure behind in order to come invite you to the treasure. Jesus isn't the son who, Jesus isn't the older brother. Jesus isn't the religious son who came to this earth to make himself look good, to get pats on the back from us, to prove that we are bad and he is good. That's not Jesus. Jesus came to this earth and he humbled himself. He died on the cross to serve and make others righteous. He is the perfect son. He's the son. He's the one. Jesus is the greater brother. Which one are you in this story? The older brother who's just trying to prove yourself and make yourself look good and make God in debt to you? Or maybe are you the younger brother who's been running, who has been trying to find happiness and contentment apart from God? Both of them need Jesus. Both of them need the love and the grace of the Father. Here's my last question. Whichever son you are, here's my last question. Are you ready to come home? Are you ready to come home? Is it time to come home? Let's pray. God, thank you for loving us through Jesus. Thank you for this parable and teaching us just how good you are and how much you love us, and teaching us that you want us to come home, that your invitation to come home is always on the table. For those of us in this room this morning who have been running, who have been hiding, who have been trying to find happiness and contentment in the things of this world, but who are now discouraged and maybe even miserable, God, help us see that you are where we will find happiness and contentment. Help us to find you to be the best Father, the best option through Jesus. May today be our day. In your Son's name I pray. Amen. This morning, if you're ready to come home, it's only through Jesus. And if today's your day, then during the next 5 or 10 minutes, when I'm done here, I'm going to walk back by the exits. Be standing there praying and worshiping with everybody. But if you're ready to make a decision for Jesus this morning, then I'd love to walk walk you through what's next, what that means and what's next for you. Come see me. We're going to go into a time of communion where we remember that Jesus died for us. The bread and the juice represent his body and his blood. And it's where we remember that Jesus is the better, older son, that he is the one, the only way to the Father through his sacrifice. And at Church of the Crossroads, we've got stations around the room, and what we do is when you're ready, you don't have to get up when the crowd gets up, but just whenever you're ready, have your hearts prepared. You're remembering Jesus. You would move to one of those stations, you would grab a piece of bread, you would dip it in the juice, and you just give thanks by taking that bread and juice that represents it. All right?
Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken heart, let rescue begin. Come find your mercy, oh sinner, come kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your faith. Oh, wonder come. Oh, you're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who stray. Come sit at the table, come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary, or rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't cure. Your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. So wonder, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are, come as you are, fall in his arms, come as you are. There's joy for the morning, oh sinner, be still. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. So wonder, come home. You're not too far. So lay I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my turn till I met you. When you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old me knew Jesus when I met you. 'Cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. When you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Come on, church. We're going to declare a story of salvation this morning. Are you ready? I needed rescue. My sin was heavy. The chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter.